Okay, so hello. I'm sorry to say that Mark Harris, he is out busy dealing with the snow. So you won't get some detailed information on his perspective on the projects, but I'll try and share the information that I have that I know the Township Public Works staff would be willing for me to share with them. So I work with Manor Township, and they have 8 stormwater retrofit projects identified in their pollutant reduction plan that they are tackling themselves with their public works staff, which is a pretty lofty goal. But after seeing what they've done over the past 2 years, they're very talented, and I think they're doing a great service to their residents by saving a lot of money on implementing these projects. And so I'm going to go over 3 of them, as you kind of saw from the jazzy video that was played twice. So Manor Township is southwest of Lancaster City in Lancaster County and extends to the Susquehanna River. So it's really south of Route 30 and west of Millersville Borough. Their urbanized area is pretty much tucked up into the northeast corner, where it is adjacent to the city of Lancaster and Millersville Borough. There's tiny little pockets along the Susquehanna River from some older developments in that area, but the primary surface stream through the urbanized area is the Little Conestoga Creek. And that's where all 3 of these projects that I'm going to go over with in this presentation are discharging to. And this kind of blow up of the area, you can see the Little Conestoga Creek meanders through a highly residential developed area. And so their BMP options 1 and 2 were to retrofit 2 existing detention basins in a residential development, older, probably from the 1980s is when the development was constructed. So just old dry detention basins. And then they did implement a bioswale through one of their community parks. Let's see. So their total existing sediment load is 803,000 pounds per year. And so they're required to reduce 80,000 pounds per year in this first 5-year permit term. The 3 basins that I'm going to go over to today were installed in 2018 or 2019 and 2020. Their first project was actually a small basin right behind their municipal building, which is what I have shown here. It was just a tiny little basin. It was like a 4-acre drainage area, but it really gave them kind of a learning experience on whether they could do these projects themselves. And with Manor Township, they have their own compost facility, so they are able to take advantage of the fact that they can use their own material for the bioretention basins, which is really a cost savings as well. And I know that this year they really had supply problems with their compost because a lot of municipalities are doing bioretention basins, and amended soil or compost is hard to get in some places. So the first project is, we call it the Williamsburg Basin because it's adjacent to Williamsburg Road. And as you can see from the picture on the left, the basin was really neglected. This residential development, it did border the Little Conestoga Creek, and so there was designated open space area along the creek that the developer was owned and was supposed to maintain, but we know how that usually goes. And so we ended up with just a basin that I don't think the municipality had ever inspected since it was constructed. There was never any complaints about it, so there was really no reason for the township to go over there and check the conditions of it. But a couple years ago, the township actually took ownership of this open space. And so they now actually own the land. They're putting in a pedestrian trail along the creek, but then it gave them the opportunity to retrofit these detention basins. And part of their goal when we were selecting projects for the township, they really wanted to make sure that they picked enough projects that they on property that they owned, so they wouldn't have to deal with trying to negotiate agreements or easements with private landowners. And they also didn't want to do any stream restoration projects for this first term. I don't know if it's because they knew they had ownership of six detention basins in the township. They thought that would be enough, and it actually is pretty well will meet their pollutant reductions by doing retrofits on their own property. So I think the next permit term they're going to have to do some stream projects. But anyway, this Williamsburg Basin, it was a smaller drainage area, 8.2 acres, with only about 3 acres of impervious area. And so the sediment reductions are low, but once again, they wanted to start with something small. And so they had to clear out all of the existing vegetation. And for this project, they ended up expanding it a little bit just because they wanted more area to for infiltration. And so you can see the existing basin was the outlet pipe coming into the basin pretty much marked the western edge. And so they did expand it a little bit into their the rest of their property. Basically, what they did is they flattened the bottom. They removed about 18 inches of soil to put in 18 inches of amended soil, and modified the outlet structure. So basically, the size of the pipe coming into the basin and the size of the pipe going out of the basin were exactly the same in the existing condition. So the township actually fabricated, if you can see on this little detail, just kind of a steel plate with a orifice in it to so that small storms up to a certain, I think it's about 6 inches high, all of the 2-year storm will infiltrate into the basin. And then during larger storms, there's the ability for that water to kind of skip over the outlet structure and into the pipe outlet. So a pretty simple design, but it does give them water quality benefits. And so for this first basin, they excavated. There was no problems. We did some infiltration testing, and it was very well infiltrate. I mean, there's no problems with infiltration at all. So the water really just goes right into the soil. And you can see what they did is they mixed 50% compost and 50% sand is their amended soil. And it's very dark, and they've seeded the banks and matted it, and it's really impressive. I think they really know that their public works staff has the talent to do this kind of work. I think one of their employees actually used to be an excavator, so he's very, I want to say, nimble with the equipment and can read the plans, which is helpful. And then this was the first growing season. I think it was, it was completed in the fall, went through the winter, so this would be the following growing season. But it's one of the Ernst seed mixes, so they mow it at the very beginning of the year, and then they'll just let it grow until into the fall. And they're really happy with it. It's infiltrating. There's been no problems. The homeowners that are adjacent to this basin have not complained about it, which sometimes we do worry about that because a lot of homeowners don't like to see, they're worried about mosquito habitat and water ponding, but so far that has not been an issue. So they really got some confidence by doing this project, and the design elements are similar to the next project, which was the Monticello Basin. It's in the same development. It's just downstream of the Williamsburg Basin, but this one was more challenging. As you can see, this basin basically had converted back to a woodlands. It had not been maintained, and when I first went out there, it was really difficult for me to understand where the basin was because it just looked like a path through the woods. And this picture here, you can see it's just, the basin, the top of the bank before it goes down into the basin was really just defined by this this vegetation here. So we did end up finding the inflow structure, the outflow pipe, and the neighborhood kids had been using this as like a dirt bike track. So they had ramps built in it, and it seemed like it would have been a fun activity if you're a kid to drive down the basin banks and then up. And so when we identified this as a possible retrofit project, and then we went out to the site, we were a little bit shocked at the level of effort it would take to retrofit this. Because like a lot of municipalities, when we were looking for projects, we did a lot of it based on looking at aerial plans. And so we knew there were basins here. It had a pretty significant drainage area of 42 acres. So the sediment reductions by doing a retrofit were, at 20,000 are pretty significant. But then the reality of actually having to retrofit this was a little bit daunting. So the first thing that the municipality had to do was clear all of the trees. And there was a discussion about, are any of these trees worth saving? Is it going to be like a bio basin with some actual trees planted? Because, I think there were some sycamore trees in there that had a 6-inch diameter trunk. And we were also worried about whether the residents would complain, first of all, about taking away their great dirt bike trail, but also, you have this great, what appears to be a wooded area, and we're then having to remove all of these trees to put a basin in. But actually, the residents were very happy that the township took over this open space because they've put a trail in and they've actually monitored it. So there aren't that many people in there using it for purposes other than what it's supposed to be, which is just a natural walking trail. And so the noise from the dirt bike has been eliminated. And, sometimes the fears of what's going to happen are worse than actually what happened. So that was the case in this instance. The basin boundary really was just wasn't changed. We did all of the modifications within the existing berm. So there was there's 2 inflow pipes. One's coming off of Monticello Lane, and then another one is coming on the rear of some of the houses in the area. And then the outflow pipe, once again, was just a large pipe with no orifice plate or no outlet control that just, discharged to the little Conestoga Creek. And before we did anything, you could really see all of the road cinders from when they would treat the development in the winter. There was no vegetation on the ground surface. So anytime it rained, water would get in there and just kind of carry all that debris and sediment along with it into the little Conestoga. Just the wooded area of it did not allow any kind of grass to grow or even any type of ground cover, plus the disturbance from the dirt bikes. So it really did have a lot of problems, even though you may not have thought so at the beginning when it was totally wooded, but it was really not functioning well as a basin, water quality basin. So after the trees were removed, the township went in and just, we had the original plan, so we knew what the original bottom of the basin was supposed to be. And there had been some accumulated sediment in the bottom just from years and years of buildup. And so excavating the bottom, removing the topsoil so that you could put the 18 inches of amended soil in. And once again, neither of these basins have under drains because the infiltration rate was fairly high. And then still it was a 50% compost and 50% SAM mix with the Ernst seed mix on top. And they added some riprap from the pipe inflow to prevent erosion and had some nice matting around it. And this actually was just installed in the fall of 2020. So this will be the first growing season, like in 2021. So it'll be great to see how it survived the winter. And the township did this pretty quickly. They the next project that I'll go over was the vegetated swale. They did that, but then they figured out they would have enough time to do this project. So they didn't start it till September, I think, of 2020. And in a couple weeks, it was finished. So it was really impressive. And then Mark went out there during a storm to see how it was working, and he got this great picture. I think it, you know, we don't know if any of the vegetation, like in the basin itself, has, you know, what the status of that, but you can see that water is ponding in there. It's going to infiltrate into the ground, and the riprap looks great. So, I mean, this was a really nice picture, and it just shows what a great job that the public works staff can do if they have the actually willingness and support of the supervisors to do that. And I wish Mark was here to talk more about, you know, he works directly with his staff and just understanding how the projects are actually, you know, how the public works staff actually feels about doing these compared to some of their other activities. But they are learning a lot about green infrastructure, and I think that's going to help them as they're responsible for maintaining these structures as well. And then the third project I'm going to go over is a bioswale that was installed in the community park. There's a stormwater pipe that goes under Route 741 from a residential development that discharges just into the park. And so it pretty much traveled kind of sheet flow across the park into the little Conestoga Creek. And it's a fairly small drainage area, and the sediment reductions are about 4,000 pounds per year. But once again, it's a different project. It's on their own property, and it was something that would give them some credits. And so here's the design. Here's the existing pipe, and it's really just a straight shot down to the creek. I don't know offhand how far it is. It's probably about 300 feet. There's amended soils installed in the swale, and they're kind of installed in lifts so that with some berms underneath, so that over time the amended soils don't start sloughing down the slope, which I guess we've seen in some other projects, older projects. And so stormwater will come in during small scale storms. A lot of that water will infiltrate into the ground. And a lot of riprap was placed at the pipe outfall. And then you can see here, and once again, this was seeded in probably September of 2020. So the grass was coming up pretty nicely. And then it's just a straight shot, and here is the discharge into the little Conestoga Creek. So once again, there's a lot of riprap in that area. So those are the three projects. I will go over a little bit about the cost, because these projects were really modifying existing detention basins. There was no required permit from the conservation district. Each one was close. You know, if you looked at the total disturbed area, especially the first basin, because we did expand it, I think that was close to an acre, but because a lot of it was remediating an existing basin, that area did not count towards the disturbed area. And then this vegetated swale was less than an acre, so there was no permit required for that. And the cost savings for the township to do these projects themselves is really significant because it doesn't have to be publicly bid, which adds a lot of cost. And they use their own compost that they had. For the 2 basins, the only we had some design costs and some survey, as-built survey, so we could get the existing topo and see how much sediment had built up over the years. So probably less than $10,000 in survey engineering costs for the basins, and then the swale is probably even less than that. So significant, because I'm thinking about some of the other bioretention basin projects that have been publicly bid, and they can be up to $200,000. So significant cost savings. The township has, like I said, they have 8 stormwater BMPs that they're going to retrofit. So in addition to these 2 and the swale, they did a very small basin that I mentioned earlier. So that's 3 basins and a swale. This year, they are actually going to do 2 more basin retrofits. One of them is in the Springdale development, which is just west of Millersville. And this basin will be a little bit different because the basin was actually built around a spring. So when I went out to look at it a couple of weeks ago, there was a pretty significant continual flow coming out of the storm pipes through the basin. And there's no stream component to it. It's just there must be spring water getting into the existing stormwater system in the development, and it's discharging into the basin. So that retrofit project will probably have to include some constructed wetland areas to deal with that continual flow. Which is probably dries up a little bit in the summer, but we'll still have to accommodate that. And that's a pretty big project. I think the drainage area is, let me see if I have the drainage area. Let's see, Grider Park. Yeah, that drainage area is about 38 acres with 15 acres of impervious. So they'll get 21,000 pound reduction estimate for that project. One of their other projects are in Grider Park. It's a public park. There's a tiny little detention basin that's probably even smaller than the one at their municipal campus. They'll get 3,600 pounds per year. But then they're also going to do a bioswale in the Grider Park and to treat some upland water from the development, and that'll also get about 3,300 pounds per year. So they have those 3 projects to do this year, and then I think they have one more swale to do, and that should give them their pollutant reductions, for the first permit round. They've basically used up all of the stormwater facilities that they own in the urbanized area. So, like I said, I think they'll be looking for some stream projects and maybe working with another municipality because there's portions of the little Conestoga Creek that they share the boundary with Lancaster Township. So there's some opportunities for cooperation. So I think that is all I have. Are there any questions? I see.
Carol, looks like we've had a pop up in the chat.
Yeah, so the road cinders, I think, and Mark would be able, I think they've stopped using cinders. They're going more with like a salt mixture, like a brine solution and salt. I'm pretty positive they're moving towards that so they don't have to clean out their inlets. I know they have a pretty robust inlet cleaning program. So I'm not sure if all their inlets have like sumps in them where the debris would collect, but they're definitely like aware that, they don't want road cinders to be discharged into the basin because it's just going to add maintenance to their, to their workload.
Okay, there's another question about media.
Yeah, have you had more success with a 50 sand, 50 compost? I don't know. It seems to work right now for the township. I know I have heard some concerns with compaction, with when you add more topsoil into the mix. But then I've also heard people saying that compost itself leaches nutrients into water, and so that's an issue too. So right now, because the municipality has a supply of compost, that's what they're using, and that's worked so far. I don't know if that'll change in the future.
Yeah, Sarah, I was going to ask about that compost blend. Have you done any monitoring of any of these systems to see what's coming through them, or any testing on the sand compost mixtures to see how things like with pathogens and metals that are in compost sometimes, to see how those levels are?
No, they have not done any testing. They would really have to capture the water at the outflow pipe, and they don't really have any like before measurements either. I mean, that's just something they haven't gotten into yet. I know, hopefully once the vegetation gets established, and that will help with some of the excess nutrients. But I've just heard in general some of the concerns with putting compost in these water quality basins. Yeah.
All right. It's getting a little echo off my video cam, so I'll try my headset. Yeah, Kara, well, there's no more questions. I think I've seen some of that research myself. That's why I was asking, as I know that's been an issue in some places where exporting, particularly phosphorus, sometimes pathogens as well, and seen some with metals too, depending on what's in the compost and where it came from.
Yeah, I mean, they have a collection facility, so it's all woody debris from residents that drop it off. That's where their compost is coming from.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's going to have to change. Like if they continue to sell it to people, are they going to then start, looking for topsoil? And I've heard, it's a balancing act, trying to figure out the best mix with the products that you might have available at the time. So now these basins were in a great location because they really infiltrated well, and I think absolutely having 50% sand, it would be is really, you need I think 50% sand, not any less than that, to ensure good infiltration. They do have a bigger basin on the list that is probably, I think that's like over an acre in size. And I think we'll end up retrofitting part of that basin, not the whole thing. And by then we'll know how these are performing and be able, at least visually, and how they're supporting vegetation, to maybe determine if there'll be another mixture for that basin. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's in the manuals. I know there's several available, but I know NC State published a mix a few years ago, and I think the Villanova recommends a similar mix. It's even as much as 85% sand within a mix of silts or finer materials and a smaller amount of organic material, which I think, there's obviously some amount of sand and fines in the compost. So I don't know. That does seem to be an ongoing debate, though.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's the best thing. So for Manor, because they had so much compost ready available, that's what we went with.
Okay.
Yeah. But I know I mean, for municipalities who are trying to save money, you really just have to know your public works staff. You know, do they have the talent and capacity to do these projects? Because we've heard from Manor, just the public bidding of these projects is just adds so much cost to the project, and they really, some of them are really get annoyed by that, and so they are looking for options on how to save money. And it's worked out well for Manor. It's worked out well for West Hempfield. You just have to really know the limits of your staff. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any more questions for Kara? Feel free to put those in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask the question, that'd be great as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Kara, I mean, you mentioned the cinders being an issue in construction, but have you found any challenges in maintaining these systems? Are you using crews from? I know in the previous session, Andrew mentioned that they're using their crews, their public works crews for anything stormwater related, but then Parks and Rec is doing some of the maintenance for the vegetation or park elements.
Yes.
How are you approaching that with these projects?
So Manor, their public works staff is going to maintain them all. I printed out like a pretty detailed like mowing schedule to get the earned seeds established, because I know the first 3 years it's pretty, you have to really make sure that invasive weeds aren't coming in, you know, cattails are a problem. And so making sure they understand that for the first 3 years, you know, you might have to mow it to 8 inches, and just giving them information on warm season grasses and how they grow different than the cool season grasses and lawn species that are easy to maintain. You just mow them when they get too high. Well, the warm season grasses that are typically part of the earned seed mix, you know, can't be maintained like that. So I did a little manual for the public works guys, and, you know, Mark has been, you know, read it and they're following it. And it's just, you know, the first year's kind of easy. You get the nurse crop coming up and you know, it looks green. So this year it's going to be interesting to see what's coming up, and, you know, seeing some of the warm season grasses become established and making sure that there's no invasives moving in. Because that's a chore in itself, having to, you know, once cattails or something gets in, having to go back and redo it, reseed it. No public works guys likes to weed. I mean, they like using like big equipment, but spot spraying and weeding, I don't think is on their preferred task list. And I see a question about DEP conduct site visits. No, I mean, we reported once, you know, on the annual report, we report on the projects that were finished that year. And so on the last annual report, we put in the first basin, Monticello, because that had been in for a year. And I think both the vegetated swale and the second basin were still under construction, so we haven't reported on that. I would imagine, you know, if DEP is going to continue to do some of their audits like they did a couple years ago, they probably want to check on the PRP projects, but we haven't heard anything specific on that. So they're kind of taking their word for it that their projects are going in.
Okay, still plenty of time for questions if there are any more for Kara.
And the township didn't have any grant monies for this. They're one of the townships that wasn't interested in pursuing grants, I guess because they were going to plan on doing it themselves. But recently there's a new residential development a concept plan that came in that borders the west branch of the Little Conestoga. And so we were kind of steering the conversation to hopefully we can get a stream restoration project during that development. And so if Growing Greener comes out with another round in 2021, the township will probably pursue that. Because I don't think even their public works staff can do a stream project. It's a specialized skill, I think.